Morning.
Wonderful to be here. I think we got a really great audience here and for a really exciting and important discussion. So thank you, Ilka, already for providing a great background on the topic we're now going to discuss. And as I mentioned, the topic is subsidies and trade barriers, analyzing the impact of IRA, high energy costs, and EU regulations. I really want to make this really interactive. So I really hope we can, you can provide a lot of questions and we can engage you as much as possible in this discussion. I got a fantastic panel with us. We got Dr. Markus Hackstein with us, the speaker of the board of VARTA, right next to me. Then we got Ilka, we just heard from Ilka von Dalwig, the policy manager of EIT InnoEnergy. Then we got Einar Jensen, the co-founder and executive chairperson of the board of directors of Freyr, right at the end over there. And Sebastian, CEO of PowerCo. And we also got Kai-Uwe Wollenhaupt, president of SVOLT Europe and vice president of SVOLT Energy Technology Limited. I also have a poll for us, just to get a bit of a, set a bit of the scene, because we talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's going to be a discussion we're going to have here from a different perspective as well. And I would like to gauge the room, how you're thinking about it. Do we need a European Inflation Reduction Act? So there's going to be a poll somewhere on Slido, so if you want to kind of put your thoughts down there, we can discuss this a bit later on as well. And you can already put questions in. So again, we want to have a lot of questions from the audience, so really encourage you all to make use of Slido. So we want to go straight to questions. We want to get your thoughts, your insights on this important topic. So I would like to actually start with you, Ilka, because you already just spoke and gave a bit of a perspective on some of the regulations out there. And I think my first question would be, looking at these regulations, especially on the European side, which of them do you think has the biggest impacts so far?
I think the biggest impact so far is actually the battery regulation that is already adopted, and already before its adoption, I think it's a quite innovative piece of regulation trying to protect our market with helps of CO2 footprint. The battery passport is a very new concept, looking at traceability as well. And we felt a very great interest from countries outside Europe that are actually contacting us, the European Commission, trade associations. What do we need to do to comply with the EU battery regulation? So I think this is really something good. For the rest, there's still work in progress, I would say. And unfortunately, compared to the IRA, there's very little direct subsidies, incentives, financial measures tied to them. And this is an inherent problem of the European Commission and how it is structured, I would say. As soon as you have to agree on a budget between 27 member states. So the Commission, in many times, they want to, and they are pushing for things, but then you have 27 member states, and they are not all convinced that this is really where we should spend our money. So this tension between the Commission and the member states, I think, is something that will make a European response to the IRA quite difficult.
Great, thanks so much, Ilka. And maybe another, if you look at the European side, and maybe if it's you, Kai-Uwe, from SVOLT, from a Chinese perspective as well, on subsidies, and how to kind of settle yourself in Europe. What are your perspectives on this? Is it enough? Does it need more?
I'm not a politician. I'm quite honest, and I think this better regulation is, I think, a very nice move toward reducing the impact of battery industry on the environment, but it doesn't even remotely help the localization of the battery industry. The only thing what we have in Europe which is helping the localization, I think, is a EU-UK trade agreement which asks for local content. I was greatly disappointed when I saw the battery regulation, that we are talking about battery passport, battery CO2 of emission and so on, but none about localization. So if we then put that in a perspective that we are not sufficiently subsidized in Europe compared to IRA in US and the Chinese environment. So you have shown it by yourself, we are highly uncompetitive. And I'm part of a Chinese company, and we are acting as a European market, I think, with competitive products. So, and I have always to battle, are we localizing, are not localizing? And the only thing, and I think the only thing which is driving the localization in Europe are the OEMs. It's not the EU, no? Because the battery passport I can do in China, I can do it in US. The CO2 footprint I can calculate with the supply chain out of China. In any case, the raw material is coming out of China a lot. So you are proud of your regulation, and probably with the 27 partners, it's the best we could do, but by far it's not good enough. So I lost 3 businesses to China. We are importing that from China instead of an originally location here. And then, sorry, I had to get that out of my system. In subsidies, the same thing. If we're talking about subsidies, there is no plain level field. We don't have to look to IRA and China, but we can see it in Europe. Yeah? If you're talking to the chip industry, you get subsidies for 3 million per working place. If you go talking GRW or TCTF or so on, you are talking about 750. So it's amazing how different we are treated. And then you're talking, I can talk for Germany, TCTF, 1 billion subsidies. It's ridiculous compared to what we see how the chip industry is being subsidized. Yeah? And if you then see the amount of players you have in the chip industry and the amount of players you have in the battery industry, so this is so unbalanced. It's frustrating, I think, for people who has to drive the battery industry in Europe. And I think in Europe we can do better.
Great, thanks so much, Kai-Uwe, for this perspective as well. And another perspective, as with Markus, maybe with VARTA, has been operating in Germany for quite some time and has seen, a couple of developments, some of the developments you just also summarized in your presentation. So what's kind of your perspective on this, on the support in Europe right now?
Yeah, we produce quite a lot of chemical systems, and we see sometimes a good intention on tariffs and those things, but the regulation and the execution then has a lack. It's not thought through thoroughly till the end. One example is what happened with the manganese dioxide. There was anti-dumping regulation putting on some import tariffs, which led to the situation that basically our raw material is increasing because we don't get enough raw material in Europe, neither in quantity nor in quality. So our production costs go up, while on the same side, imports of finished batteries out of China don't have a tariff. So we have this twofold effect. We have basically a disadvantage, whereas the intention was the other way around. And what happened in the same period of time is America did something. Mr. Trump protected US with, against all those shipments from China. So a lot of capacity, which in the past was intended to be shipped to the United States, now moved to Europe. So we see additional supply also coming to Europe, putting a pressure on the price. And I think there we have to be more together in a common thinking and not just have a single point of entry there and just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And the other example I want to give is what happened with Mr. Wiersing's law on the subvention on the charging of electric vehicles in Germany. As we are also a producer of home storage batteries, and I think you mentioned there how big the market share of non-European companies is. You can say by this subvention scheme, 80% is a subvention due to Chinese producers because it's handed over there. So there is not a single word which says a European footprint must be there to apply for the subvention. And those things, I think, we need to work on. We need to do some lobbying that everybody is aware. We can only survive as a European industry if we have this level playing field, as was mentioned before.
Great, thanks so much, Markus. And maybe if we stay on this now, we spoke a bit about the EU regulations and subsidies and support, and maybe also some lack or something you wish there would be more of. Another topic in the title we can also see is the topic of high energy costs. And Sebastian, I know in the prep that's something you also brought up as a challenge. So maybe if you can share a bit of your perspective on this, how are we standing on this topic?
Yeah, before we start, I would like to make one small comment regarding your slide. It said Volkswagen Salzgitter in planning. Actually, we're starting production next year, so maybe you can correct the slide next time. The next topic I want to say, and I think maybe following the entire discussion here, what is our mission? Our mission as industry is to make sure electric cars are affordable. So when I listen to discussions about import duties, of importing cheap cells, then yes, maybe we're helping the local industry, but we're not helping the society, right? We need to make sure we make batteries and electric vehicles affordable, otherwise the transition towards electric mobility will not be successful. And right now we see as a good example that electric cars in China are cheaper than ICE cars in China. If I look in Europe, we have double the price. Let's be realistic. And if you want a realistic price and you want that everybody's able to afford electric cars, we need to work on affordable battery industries, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think what's also very important, and I think I get also very emotional myself because it's a very important topic. If we make incentives, we need to make sure that those incentives are equal to everybody, right? Because right now the TCTF framework might be beneficial for new factories, but there are a lot of factories already being in the construction, and according to European regulation, we cannot even apply for them because the Maßnahmen begin already started, right? So that's something where an IRA, as it is in North America, is more fair because it's really something which is granted per produced battery cell kilowatt hour, right? So that's basically the second part. And the third part, we have the task to make sure that batteries produced in Europe are not only localized, but they're also competitive, right? And how do I make batteries competitive? Well, there are three components, right? First of all, we need to make sure we have the capex under control, right? So that means we need to have good equipment, good building, good clean and dry room cost. And I think this is also one thing where we lack competitiveness right now. The second one is labor. We need to be more productive. The thing which kept the automotive industry localized in Europe is our productivity. Yeah, that's the second one. It was never the labor cost, it was the productivity. We really need to work on productivity. And the third one is energy. Energy consumption, yes. I see a lot of activities already since years in microenvironments, but to be honest, the first ones which are localized is in Asia, right? So we need to really get from PowerPoint engineering into execution. And the second part of energy is the energy cost. Energy cost in Europe, especially in Middle Europe, countries such as Germany, they're just killing the industry, right? So it's really difficult if we're talking about an energy price of 20 cents per kilowatt hour, you're not able to compete. And if you talk about 3-digit gigawatt hours per year you need to produce, it's not a minor thing, it's a major thing, right? And it really drives us. If in North America you can go into low single-digit cents per kilowatt hour, versus in Middle Europe, we're happy if we're in 10 cents per kilowatt hour ranges. This is a double of a price, which you really feel also on the car, right? So you're talking in a car about around a 3-digit amount euro just due to differences in energy prices. And that's something we need to work on, right? So I think we need to really think together, not about how can we prevent competitive batteries to get in, but how can we produce competitive batteries at competitive pricing in Europe? Because the ultimate target is to make our BEVs made in Europe at least the same price as ICEs. That's our mission.
Great, thanks so much for this, Sebastian. And then, Tom, we have you. And there was also the poll, I think, I'm not sure if it's still live, but it was about 86% or so of the room thinks we should have a European, or we can see the 87 now, I should have a European IAA. And of course, Tom, I know this is a big discussion for you. We spoke about this also yesterday. I know you have a lot of also US investors and a bit of support there. And how has the IAA impacted your plans? Like, what has been your experience?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for inviting us here. It's great to be in a room of friends coming from Norway, where we don't seem to have a lot of friends these days. But having said all of this, I think we need to understand where this is coming from and what the battery industry is all about. The battery industry is here because we want to decarbonize society. And decarbonizing society means decarbonizing transportation, which is one big part of it, and you've spoken about it right now. And the second part is to decarbonize the energy system. And batteries are equally important in both. Today, there's about 2.5 terawatt hours of batteries running around in the world, or sitting in containers, etc. That needs to go to 200 terawatt hours in a world that is fully decarbonized. And that needs to happen in record-breaking time. So it's not a matter of where and whether we should produce batteries in Europe and the United States. It's only a matter of when. We need to double cumulatively installed capacity of battery production 7 to 8 times over the next 20-ish years if the world is going to stay reasonably climate compliant. So the Inflation Reduction Act should be seen in that light. It is, point number one, a climate bill. It is really about ensuring decarbonization of US society. Second, it's about regional energy security, or ensuring critical energy infrastructure produced in the United States. And third, it's about reducing energy cost. So the Inflation Reduction Act is actually the third intention with that bill. Now, Europe has granted, pun intended, and provided capex relief to a number of plants. But they've not provided the kind of incentives that the Inflation Reduction Act opens up for. And the TCTF opens up for this in select regions, so I agree, this should be fair and across the board for everyone, but nobody, no member country in EU have so far taken up that gauntlet. Because it's expensive, but it doesn't discriminate against, the winners. It doesn't select one company, and it doesn't select one technology. So this is really about accelerating the energy transition. We're moving from a world where energy is produced in select regions, the Middle East, Russia, Norway, US, a couple of other places, and exported to localizations around the world. We're moving to a world where energy is going to be produced and used locally. Solar is going to be the most competitive form of electricity. And all of these technologies, be it solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, batteries, hydrogen, these are technologies, first and foremost. And they're subject to learning curves. And every time you double cumulatively installed capacity of something that is subject to learning curves, you have a drop in cost. Solar has enjoyed 30% reduction in cost every time you've doubled capacity. You're going to double that 3-4 times more over the next couple of decades. Batteries, you're going to double 7 times. So to the previous speaker's point, how do we create ecosystems and partnerships in Europe to be competitive? How do we be at the front of that learning curve? How can we implement digital solutions into how we're producing batteries? How can we optimize the product design? How can we improve process design? There are multiple examples in and around Europe where facilities have tripled or quadrupled or even tenfolded productivity because we're doing things smarter. I don't think we should lull ourselves into some sort of fancy notion that we're going to be able to compete with the Chinese in Europe based on European principles. We have to compete on different terms. And the final thing I'll say is, we have to be very happy and send a big round of applause to the Chinese for what they've done. If the Chinese hadn't done what they've done, the world would have been in much worse shape when it comes to the energy transition than what we are today. We should learn from them. We should also partner with them, but we should also find a way to improve our own technology footprint.
Great, thanks so much, Tom. Great, thanks so much. So you already see a bit of the perspectives. I think we have a really well-rounded panel, which is fantastic to see these different perspectives and insights. So now I want to already go to some questions, and we maybe can feed some in later on. I see there's a bit of a race going on right now between 2 questions, so maybe we can start with the 2 of them. So now the current winning one is on the EVs. So I'm concerned seeing the reduction of EVs in Germany in 2023, especially because Germany sees itself as an automotive country. What do you think is the reason for the observed EV reduction in 2023? Is there someone who want to start on this question? Tom, you go.
I mean, this is not rocket science, right? I mean, interest rates are very high. and affordability is becoming an issue. And until we fix that, it's going to be sluggish. And of course, adoption is now at a higher point of the S-curve than what it used to be. So it's becoming into that part of adoption where affordability becomes more important. So to the point, we need to get costs down, both on the production of the vehicle itself and of course on the key components, which batteries comprise the bulk of the cost.
And I think one thing is the cost of production. The other thing is also the operational cost. So when you right now realistically buy, and I mean maybe some of you use ENBW as an example or Ionity, you cannot charge below 50 cents per kilowatt hour anymore, and suddenly it becomes cheaper even at these gas prices to use a diesel car than an electric car. So the advantage you had a few years ago regarding like recharging for 20 or 18 cents per kilowatt hour is not there anymore, right? And I think this is probably the critical part why it's slowing down. I wouldn't say it's reducing, I would just say it's slowing down.
And I think we have to add also, I think we were talking about subsidies. Subsidies are going down significantly. I think one of the big drivers also of electrification was the PHEVs. PHEVs are not subsidized anymore. I think they were one of the major cars, company cars, I think, and all these incentives we have enjoyed, I think, last year, I think now are putting, let me say, in question, and there's a big uncertainty. And if there is an uncertainty, the buyers will be more reluctant to proceed.
I still think, even if it's going sluggish, we should not forget that if you're looking at sales number right now, they are reducing the most for fossil-powered cars, and EV are the only one that are gaining market share. And I think October was the first month where EV sales, in fact, surpassed the sales of fossil cars. So the market is developing. It's, alas, developing slowly, but it's at least developing in the right direction.
Fantastic. Then we can go to the second question maybe. Since machinery is a key limiting factor, can we expect to see a stronger focus on supporting the currently struggling machine manufacturing sector in Europe? I know there's a lot of suppliers in the room. We saw this earlier. So I know it's on top of mind of many of you. Any thoughts?
I think from a producer's perspective, there's a clear yes. Because we were always strong as a niche player, and we always had some exclusive partners, so some are sitting here in the room, whom we developed our process technology, and this gave us the innovation and protected us against competition. But we have to be honest at the moment. What we see also, Chinese machinery production companies are catching up, that they have a real good quantity and quality. Meanwhile, their lead time is much faster. So we need to bring this innovation into the whole supply chain again to be ahead. Because as you mentioned, we need to be innovative, being strong and being more productive. And this is key, I think, among the whole industry.
I think that, I mean, yes, machine is a limiting factor to a certain extent. We need to be honest, and right now, I mean, if we look globally, right, not only in Europe, for battery cell production equipment, there's an oversupply right now in the market. Let's be honest, right? So because there's huge capacities being built up, especially in China, and right now, especially there, the market is really struggling. So the growth went down dramatically. Many new cell factory projects have been stopped. And that's why there's a huge amount of capacity. So that's number one. Number two, I think this won't help us in being competitive, right? That's just me too. And as such, suddenly the manufacturing industry in Europe becomes important, but becomes important not to do me too, but becomes important to build up a competitive strength and a competitive edge. And as such, the machine industry in Europe becomes very relevant when it comes to developing cutting-edge technologies, which gives us the productive edge, productivity edge, innovation edge we need in order to grow the industry here to ultimately be and become competitive.
Great, thank you. I think Tom was next.
Yeah, so I just want to build on that innovation point. I think if Europe is going to develop a competitive battery industry, it needs to differentiate itself from what is being done today. So therefore, you need to integrate machine builders and digital solutions and new ways of producing batteries to create a lower cost of the machines and lower cost of the production of the batteries. So I think innovation, as opposed to replicating what has already been done, is much more important than sort of trying to build a competitive machine building industry based on conventional technology.
Yeah. And I think, Sebastian, what you said before, efficiency. I think we were proud to be the driver worldwide in efficiency, I think. And there, the machine manufacturing in Europe was very disappointing that it took them so long to wake up and see that as an opportunity. But I think there will be the key to increase our competitiveness, to come back and use our main skills and being able to produce efficiency. Because when we are looking at the battery manufacturing sites, we are talking immediately thousands of new people. And first, they are very expensive in Europe, but second, you don't find them. So it's a cost and also, I think, a realization issue that you need to become more effective, more efficient to be successful in Europe.
Ilka.
And I really like what I heard from both of you, and saying like co-developing this industry together, because I think this is also one of Europe's strengths. Those strategic industry alliances that are so important to bring and shape this battery together right now. And I think here Europe is really also in this tension between rapidly scaling up, and I think I agree with Tom, we really need this cooperation with Asian companies to do so. But in the same time, we also need to bring along the European supplier industry and trying to both run a sprint and scaling up rapidly, but have enough power also for this marathon, because it is going to be a marathon, and develop those industry in strategic alliances together, and also giving the people that are going to work and produce and operate those machinery a chance to actually train and educate themselves in doing so, because that is the other, I think, weak spot in Europe. It's access to skills and experts.
Thank you. And some of the themes I heard was like, OPEX and CAPEX, because OPEX is a big challenge, right? We have seen it we have seen half the cost from China, the equipment. On the other hand, you talk now, you want to get new innovation into factories, reducing the OPEX. And then, of course, through collaboration, there's many in the room, so hopefully there's more innovation also coming from these discussions over the next 2 days. Great. I think another topic here, and it's going back and forth. I think we had the battery passport for some time, so maybe start with this one. It also was touched on earlier as well. The current utilization, and we spoke about this also in production, but of course, a big discussion is the battery passport 2027, European battery regulation. So, it's coming rather soon in Europe. Any perspective on this, how this can help? The challenge you see with that? Not so much here.
I think, first of all, it's a lot of work till we get there, to get all the documentation and the things affecting the supply chain done. So for us, it's at the moment a big effort to do this whole process. But at the end of the day, of course, we hope that this pays off once we see the whole passport and the whole European footprint more clearly.
Well, I can pick up if nobody else from the industry wants to. There's a couple of projects going on that is currently trying to look at what actually should be in the battery passport according to the battery regulation, but also looking at different use case on how it is going to be really useful for the industry, because this is really a tool that is intended to help and support the industry. There will be work that is quite clear to get the system into place, but it should not become an overburden for the industry to comply with. And I think for avoiding this, it is also important for the industry to engage in those projects that are currently ongoing. The German battery pass project is one of those that are currently looking at defining those use case. I mentioned, for example, the material leakage. as one of those things. Coupled to the extended producer responsibility, it can actually be a helpful tool for the industry to track and their batteries, fulfilling obligations, requirements in the battery regulation, and at the same time retaining the value of a battery inside Europe, which could be one example. But please reach out to me, whoever. I think Simon also can guide you in the right direction on the various projects that are currently ongoing, really looking at what do we need to put in a battery passport, how is it going to be useful for the industry, and what should be left outside, not to overburden the industry.
I think you gave this the topic several times as a wording regulations. And I don't want to discredit the battery passport. I think the intention is very positive, creating a transparency in the supply chain. I think also our friends from China or US who wants to import to Europe, they have to apply for the battery passport, as I understood. Nevertheless, it's an additional regulation. And I think everybody's talking that we are over-regulated, that we have to reduce regulation to become more agile, more competitive. And what we are doing, we are putting additional regulation in place. And I don't want to say it's bad or good, but it's additional work and doesn't make us less competitive. It doesn't make us more agile and more successful. It's an additional regulation. If you ask the reluctance in the industry, we don't like so much the regulations because it's
more
cost.
Is coming.
It's cost. It's cost.
More is coming.
Yeah.
So just to put it into perspective a little bit, right? So if you look at the environmental impact of how you produce the battery and how decarbonized your supply chain is. Today, roughly, you emit about 80 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour of batteries that is produced globally. So we have an ambition in our company to reduce that to below 15 kilograms. So if you assume that you can have a 60 kilogram reduction relative to a global average, and you can in some way, through battery passports and other regulation, monetize that, at 100 euros per ton, that equates to 6 euros per kilowatt hour. 6, okay? It's not 35. And 35 is the PTC, production tax credit, in the Inflation Reduction Act. So you have to put regulation and incentive into the right context. Do we really want to incentivize the buildup of a European battery industry? Then we need to put structures in place that unlock private capital. And private capital, it has a tendency to go where returns are the highest, whether we like it or not. That is capitalism, and it works everywhere. And it's going to work in Europe as well if we put these incentives in place.
And maybe also something to highlight. The incentives in the US is going downwards, meaning reduction of the price, right? The incentives against the CO2 price is only a reduction of what you pay on top, right? That's also something for us to be made aware of, right? Yeah. The CO2 pricing of the battery only is making the battery more expensive depending on the value chain you have. The IRA says, I have my baseline, and I actually further bring it down, right? So this is something to be aware of. And it's not only, actually to just make everybody aware, it's $35 per kilowatt hour only for cell production. It's additional $10 per kilowatt hour for the system production if it's localized, and additional 7,500 euros per car, which is localized. So we're talking about a much bigger reduction and incentive package, something you couldn't even dream about, which is happening in North America right now. And this is fully right. That's why we have such a focus on there. And it's actually what it will ultimately do. It will make electric cars more affordable, right? And this is something which goes absolutely in the right direction, yeah.
And let me just build on this, because this is a topic close to my heart, okay? So we have to recognize, so when people are talking about subsidies, and it's wrong to subsidize industries, etc., please let us remember that the global annual subsidy level for the fossil fuel industry is $7 trillion. Annual amount. Roughly the same amount, by the way, that is estimated is needed as annual investment into renewable energy technology to decarbonize society. Whether that is, a coincidence or not, who knows? Of that 7 trillion, roughly 80% is indirect cost in terms of CO2 emissions and its impact it has on society. So until we fundamentally, we, Homo sapiens, understand that we really need to incentivize what we need more of, and stop debating whether it works or not. We know subsidies work. We know that they generate, movement. Norway, where I'm from, we incentivized the electric car revolution. Elon Musk and Tesla is where they are in large part because of Norway. Because we have Teslas everywhere in Norway. Because we removed all taxes on electric vehicles. That's why on Ilka's slide, you see 80+% penetration of electric vehicles in Norway. So we know it works. We know how to do this. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have a poster child in terms of climate bill, which is called the Inflation Reduction Act. Let's just copy it, and let's get out of Dodge.
Great. Ilka.
I have to say.
And I think in Europe we still have to invent the wheel a little bit in a better way. And I agree that the US Inflation Reduction Act is a very efficient and quite beautiful designed incentive package. And you mentioned it, they're also looking to incentivize production. And this is what we're inherently bad at in Europe. Our system is set up to incentivize research and innovation up to industrialization, and then it stops. And then on the other hand, we incentivize the end product. And currently, if you're looking especially at solar panels, at the EVs, or batteries, where they're produced in China and then imported here. So in fact, we're incentivizing or subsidizing industry in China, not in Europe, not the production that is going to be here. So I think this is something that we, as Europe, within the member states, really have to think over. How can we change our system to make this possible? It's a system we set up ourselves to protect the internal market, but still we are not acting as an internal market. It's 27 member states that are acting for their own very good, not as an economic region. And once Europe starts doing it, I think we actually have the much more muscle powers on looking how to change the system. But it's not going to be easy.
maybe can I want to make one additional comment. So I think we're talking a lot about in general incentives and incentives about production. But one thing is, as somebody who's building up a factory here, and I think there was once the question, how do you manage your gigafactory being set up? I think we also need to think about how can we make building the factories easier, right? And I think just for talking about Germany, even if we're now maybe 200 kilometers away from Salzgitter, but the regulation I have here in Berlin is different than the regulation I have in Lower Saxony, right? When it comes to fire protection, I can tell you, I can write books about it. You have regulations on regulations. This makes it really slow, right? This makes it also not only slow, this makes it complicated, this makes it expensive. And I think this is really something we should all jointly look at. Even if I look in our factory in Spain, the regulations in Spain are again different than in Germany, right? There's a European regulation, but fire protection looks completely different in Spain than in Lower Saxony, than in Berlin, than in Baden-Württemberg. This is really complicated, right? And for somebody who wants to scale something big, it's something we really need to work together, right? So one thing is incentivizing, the other one is making the business easier, right? We have so many implications on the operational shop floor. This is really critical to us, and this is actually hindering us of building up the factory as quick as we need it to actually build up this electrified environment. Yeah.
That I think is a very important thing also when we're comparing ourselves with China and Europe. Yeah? Building up a factory here takes you 4 to 5 years. Yeah? Easy if you include all the planning and phases. In China, you are 1.5, 2 years. You have the same thing. So up to 2 and more times quicker. And that is an environment where everybody knows, and Tom mentioned that where the technology is evolving so quickly. Yeah. So it's not only that we are slow, but we are getting also with older technology on the market than our competitor. Yeah. And so this is hurting on a different level. So speed is not only, let me say, getting time to market, but it's also, I think, to come and remain competitive with our factories we are building.
Okay, you had a point.
One direct comment on this permission for or length of permitting in Europe. Both the Net Zero Industry Act and the Critical Raw Materials Act wanted to address this issue and proposed quite dramatic shortening of those permitting timelines. There was a big debate and also pushback from the member states level, especially, that didn't see why they should change their system, especially when it comes to this different expert agencies that had different roles and responsibilities. Why should we change it? But also pushback, what we heard, is from several industry players that feel stressed that, well, how could we actually have a building permit ready in 6 months? So there is a lot of hesitance still in the system to really change, abandon old models. And it's not always like I think the European Commission that is to blame, but there are very many inherent systems that are slow and that are working, and we always did it this way. Why should we change? How should we do it? So I think talk to your member states representatives as well and show them that this can be done. I know that there's a factory in Sweden that managed to get their permit in less than a year because they worked together with the authorities granting those permits. So I think that there are ways already today, if you want to work fast on how to do this, but show to your member states representatives that this is something that you really want and make it move faster.
Maybe just to be clear, it's not only the speed of permitting is, you're right, not necessarily the issue. It's the requirements. It's the requirements you need to fulfill.
Yeah.
It's actually all these different levels of environmental permit, of environmental impact assessment, sound assessment, fire protection regulations. You also have that in China, but it's standardized, right? And here, everywhere you go, you need to adapt it, and this is what costs us the time. The regulation, you're completely right. You can get in Germany even a pre-construction permit after 3 months, no problem. But whatever you need to do and actually to get the factory up and running, all those regulations, which then are found in millions of pages of regulation, this is something we need to address. And this is something we need to jointly address because, again, we don't only plan to build one factory, we plan to build multiple factories, and we actually want to build them in the same way. But right now that's not possible because we have different regulations everywhere.
Perfect. I think we have about 10 minutes. You can see we're in a good discussion. I love it. We really think quite dynamic here. I also just spend a lot of time reading lots of these documents, so very much agree with you. There's a lot to go through. So we have now a couple of questions, and I also want to have some time for closing statements. So I think now we can do a bit of a question buffet with some of the most highly rated questions. I think the battery passport already has been addressed. So now, and feel free to pick and choose whichever question you like. So we have a question there, very high up, with the elephant of the room. How does the cut of German fundings to recent decision influence of global and local battery market investment decisions? Then the passport we already have touched on. Then we have, how does the EU want to attract investment in the industry if energy costs and labor costs are this high, charging infrastructure is insufficient, and funding is low compared to other regions, for example, North America? There's another question also, how will we get more raw material in Europe? So maybe between these three, anybody of you wants to jump on any of them?
I can start. So I think it's kind of a misconception that labor costs in Europe are high. That we shouldn't think about it that way. On a per unit basis, maybe it's higher. But it's the productivity of that labor that matters, right? So it's really back to that innovation and how you apply labor and how you combine, new technology innovation with high labor productivity. That's going to be core. I think also energy costs, while they are high now, there is no reason fundamentally why Europe shouldn't have lower energy costs. It's about producing more energy. And remember, solar and onshore wind in particular have learning curves that are 20, 30%-ish every time you double cumulative installed capacity. So we will be going towards a world where energy costs are going to come down. So we need to be able to look into that horizon with more renewable energy being developed in regions where the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. And actually, most parts of the world will solar energy be the cheapest form of energy, absent maybe Scandinavia, Greenland, and northern parts of Canada and Alaska. So this is something that inevitably will happen. And then I think when it comes to raw materials, we have to also recognize and realize that raw materials tend to be where they are. So you find them in Africa, you find them in South America, you find them in Australia. What is happening now is that it's processed largely in China. But we need to also find mechanisms to process them closer to where they're going to be. So that is incentivizing the upstream part of the battery production, cathode manufacturing, anode manufacturing, etc., where energy costs, again, become a localization factor. So I think all of this needs to go together, and I think Europe has a lot of good regulation and good incentives around the Critical Raw Materials Act and all of those things, but we, again, need to ensure that the incentives to put those facilities in Europe are put in place.
Thank you, Tom. Someone else wants to pick one of the questions or add to what Tom just said? Ilka?
I can add on the question of raw materials, and I completely agree that we need to look for raw materials outside of Europe, even if we have a couple of promising projects also in Europe, that we should develop also to keep the knowledge and expertise on actually how to process and refine those materials in Europe. So I think they're quite essential that we both have a domestic production. Well, given that we are quite sure that we cannot fulfill the entire supply from European resources, but as a knowledge base, I think they are quite crucial. When it comes to resources from outside Europe, I agree that we also need to invest in processing technologies, but I would also advocate for just energy transition. Those research-rich countries, I think some of the value add needs to be also found in those countries, so that the first processing of those materials takes place in partnership, and I think Europe is already going in this direction, that the first step of processing is done in those countries, and then also the final step of refining is done in Europe. This will also avoid a lot of materials being shipped around the globe, helping us to really reach the CO2 reductions. And I think the way that China has been doing that, it's actually importing a lot of the raw materials inside China to process it. It's not the right way to go for Europe. I think here we can do a lot better, and there's a lot of innovations along this way as well.
Thank you. And we just had the Critical Raw Materials Act, right, being passed. So of course there's momentum here in Europe on this topic as well. If there's one last point you want to add on any of the questions, otherwise also go to closing statements. Everyone's happy? We can touch on them.
No, maybe only
Kai-Uwe.
a quick adding to the raw material. I think the focus in the past has been on battery factories, and we left a little bit out the supply chain. I think we are picking up now, but I think there's a big discrepancy between what we want to build as batteries and what kind of supply chain we are building up. There are few players that are coming every day more, but I think we have a lot of catching up to do so. Yeah.
Fantastic. And actually, I'm also moderating a panel at the end of today on local supply chains in Europe, so we're going to go into this topic there quite a bit more. But for now, I would like to do some closing statements. You know, what are some of the topics you wish the audience goes home with or goes into the next 2 days with and has something also to discuss? So maybe we want to start with you, Markus.
Yeah, I think for me the key message and the key takeaway for all of us is that from my understanding, and I'm representing quite a small company compared to the colleagues here with a different focus. So for us, it's niche markets. We want to compete in niche markets where we have some winning edge technology being ahead, but knowing we can't compete in mass markets because due to prices for the near future. So, and those niche markets need innovation, and those innovations we need together with the whole group of industry. If we have different types of raw materials, we have different types of equipment, and only if we achieve combining this in the best way, then we have this advantage which allows us charging a higher price. And only if we get this price premium, we have this business case which makes it worth doing the investment here. Because from our side, we see the prices there being quoted for large-scale production. We are much too small. So therefore, our strategy is niche markets. And my assumption is for a lot of players in the industries, it must also be these niche markets, because we see the mass producers out, or also in machinery, equipment. And there, I think it's hard to compete against China at the moment.
Thanks so much, Markus. And now, Ilka, maybe 30, 40 seconds.
30, 40 seconds. I think I listened to all of this, and looking back at 2017 when we developed the first strategic action plan, the European Battery Alliance is industry-led, which is very important to remember. So it's actually the message from the industry that we then put forward, looking at concrete measures for the Commission, but also for the Member States. And if we restart this version 2, the reboosted battery action plan, I really hope that you participate as we did in the past and give a strong message on what I already heard, what is still necessary for Europe to do.
Thank you. Sebastian.
Yeah, talking about making e-mobility affordable, I think we have a few measures. First of all, we need to speed up. We need to be really effective and fast on all parts of the industry. Second one, we need to think about innovations, technology innovations. Let's work together to really bring innovations on the street, but not focus on me too or copying what is existing. Then I think the next one is that we really need to think about an incentive scheme which is really helping the industry, right? Helping everybody is treated equally. Then also thinking about incentives in terms of accelerating and making regulations easier. Yeah? And last one, energy price is one of the key focus areas for us. Let's also focus on how do we get the energy price down, not only for the industry, but in the end also for the customers. Because if the customers in the end pay 50, 70 cents per kilowatt hour, they will also not go with EV. So I think we also need to address that area.
Kai-Uwe.
Okay, I think a lot of issues has been touched. But from my perspective, I think we need more entrepreneurship in all areas, not only at the company level, but I think also when we're talking about regulations. If somebody talks about regulation, they should feel like having burnt their fingers. We should reduce regulations, not increase regulations, and we shouldn't create pictures of enemies around us, but we should create pictures of opportunities, learn from the others, and apply it to the European Community.
Tom.
Yeah, final word. That's great. So first of all, we have started our first gigawatt-hour scale manufacturing facility with next generation technology in Norway. And it's 90% complete. So we're starting automated production as we speak. We are then building gigafactories in the US, driven by the Inflation Reduction Act. And there's nothing we would like more than to do the same in Europe. So the only way for us to be competitive, in my opinion, in Europe, in the European battery industry, is to scale next generation disruptive technology, be more productive than what conventional technology allows. And the final thing I'll say is we'd like to partner with everyone on that journey. So anyone and everyone here who wants to partner with Freyr, you're more than welcome to get in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. And with this, I would love to thank our panel.